This video today is kind of a haphazard culmination of just my thoughts on spirituality, enlightenment, non-duality, the reality of it, the issues involved. Just a mishmash without any organized format. Maybe you could say I'm just following the spirit. I suppose that could be true. I'm dressed in my work shirt, getting ready to go get some steel materials to finish up my project in my shop as soon as I get done making this video. So I want to throw one thing out first. It's been on my mind. Probably extremely controversial. Well, actually everything I say in this video today is going to be extremely controversial. And when I say controversial, I mean oppositional to damn near all spiritual teachings and stuff like that. So here's a stumbling block for spirituality in the world today. Well, it's always been there, but it's one stumbling block. And it deals with, I don't know how to phrase it, sexual deviancy, homosexuality, gay, LGBTQ, and all the other anything other than a heterosexual relationship. And even a heterosexual relationship is difficult if you are searching for the highest enlightenment. And it's kind of odd when you think about it, because I don't think it's possible to be fully enlightened, God enlightened, Buddha enlightened, to become one with God. Granted, I'm speaking in terms of the eternal perspective, not a limited experience in a single lifetime, because you have multiple lifetimes in reincarnation. And so even though you lack the full experience or any experience of enlightenment or being one with God or whatever these teachings that spiritual gurus talk about, you have multiple lifetimes to accomplish these things. So I would not fixate on the negativity of what I'm talking about today as if it is a permanent situation. Remember, in Christianity, Jesus taught the principle of the atonement and repentance and forgiveness, and made it crystal clear that regardless of where you are today in your life, be it awfully sinful life or completely engulfed in ignorance or whatever, that could just be a temporary condition while existing in this physical realm reality, and in fact you can, over the course of time, alter that path in course, and as if it never was, and be on the path to fully enlightened and stuff. So don't fixate upon the negativity, but rather understand the way I'm presenting it as you will absolutely 100% have to deviate from the course of ignorance. I mean, like, you have to go a different way. You can't remain ignorant and be aware. You can't follow the path of sinfulness and become one with God. But because of your dynamic nature, you can alter that path. And if not in this life, in a future life. So again, I'm saying don't fixate upon the negativity rather than understand what I'm telling you is true. You may not like it, but that doesn't mean it isn't true. Now, getting back to the sexual deviancy, if you live a life of sexual deviancy, you have cut yourself off from the truth. Does that mean people that live a life of gay, lesbian, whatever the sexual process is, other than a heterosexual spiritual life? And I'll go even further and say that assuming a person is completely and utterly 100% heterosexual, still, even that is not enough, because if a person engages in self-satisfaction, let's put it at that, that's a deviation from the path that will lead you to become one with God. That in itself severs the link between you and the pure truth from God. That doesn't mean that people that are deviant in their sexualness are bad or evil people. It just means the book is closed. They cannot receive the truth that's necessary to correct them in their path. They can't get that from God. The only way they can get it is through people like myself telling them that that is a wrong path. If you don't like what I say and you don't want to correct that path, that's entirely your free will and prerogative to do so. I'll go one step further and say it's also a sin to abuse the opposite sex, assuming there are, let's say, men that are gay, okay? But they want to have children. Let's say two men are married to each other, and they want to bring children into the mix. Well, that's just not going to happen without involving a woman. So that is a sinful practice to abuse, whether it's consensual or not, abuse the sacred process in the body of a female woman. So you're bringing children into sin through the practice of abuse. This is why, one of the reasons why the world is going to hell in a handbasket right now is because the civilized world has accepted gays and lesbians, and taking that a step further also, as being normalized and teaching that there's nothing wrong with it. And so that encourages others to live that lifestyle. And furthermore, it encourages people to support political figures that are living that lifestyle. And there again, so when they're in a political system or a corporate situation in business or whatever, they're not going to have a link directly to God. They're going to have to depend upon their own intelligence and their own wherewithal to guide them in their business, in government, in anything that they do, because they're not going to get spiritual guidance from God. They will get spiritual guidance from the God of this world, meaning Satan or Shiva, or demons or whatever, but they're not going to get spiritual guidance from God. It's just not going to happen. All right, moving on to the next issue. I see so many gurus, spiritual teachers, and I mean, when I say so many, literally all. Both in Christianity and Hinduism and everything. Literally 100% it has appeared to me so far. 100% of the written teachings from Hinduism, Buddhism, lacks it's as if it was all written by gays and lesbians. And why do I say that? Because I just talked about gays and lesbians. I'm not saying that gays and lesbians wrote, I said it's as if they wrote it. Why? Because it lacks that final link to God. It's as if they wrote everything from the guidance and direction of Satan himself. And I don't mean Satan is this evil, red-horned devil, horrible, disgusting. Maybe he is. But I'm just saying, I don't think that's the case. I think what the case is that he represents the epitome of what can be attained in the power, in knowledge of God without actually being connected to God. In other words, what path did God take to become God? In other words, why is Brahma Brahma? Why is the God that Jesus prayed to God? Why is it Jesus loved the God he prayed to? As versus Satan, where Jesus shunned Satan. He shunned Satan because Satan did not offer that living link directly connected to God, meaning Brahma. Now, maybe he was at one time and deviated from the course, which might explain why he is so knowledgeable and powerful. But he doesn't offer the absolute truth that would help someone to become one with God. And that is how the Upanishads and the Vedas and literally all the teachings of Hinduism are, and when I say Hinduism, I'm saying what is taught in Hinduism is probably the best and closest and most filled with the esoteric spiritual knowledge of the way reality is and how God created reality. It goes deeper than anything that you can find on this planet Earth. It lacks the love that is taught or provided by Jesus in the New Testament. It lacks that. But short of that, it contains way more spiritual knowledge that explains the mysteries of reality. And it does cover in Buddhism and both in Hinduism, since Buddhism is essentially a extension from the core of what was taught in Hinduism. You can call it Sanatana Dharma if you want to. Either way, doesn't matter. It's all the same thing. But it lacks the spiritual connection to the truth to get you to the final steps. Can you become, or rather than say become, can you study the depths of what the gurus teach in Hinduism and Sanatana Dharma and Buddhism and all that kind of stuff? If you study to the depths of what is available, and then you have that magical final episode that converts it all to enlightenment. Is that possible? Yes, it is. But is it possible to have the God enlightenment that Jesus possessed? No. No, you have to go beyond what is taught. You have, because it's not there. As I said, it's as if you're learning from a homosexual about God. It's going to lack the knowledge and wisdom and connection necessary to become one with God. It isn't there. But you can become enlightened like Buddha in that process. Moving on to the next step, but it's connected to what I was just talking about, is I see so many gurus, women, men gurus, women gurus, so many, that they teach non-duality. And why do they teach non-duality? Because that's all there is. There is nothing else you can derive from Eastern spiritual teachings. There's nothing else possible than to conclude spiritual non-duality from what they teach. What they teach is exactly what you might learn if you were going to a group with the guru being himself Satan. Satan would teach non-duality. But why would Satan teach non-duality? Because he believes it to be true. That's why he would teach non-duality. I find it to be sad when I see these teachers, because they are so damned confident in what they're teaching is true. I believe that for the most part, they are kind, loving human beings, doing the best they possibly can to help others to become aware, to become enlightened. That's what I believe. Is it true? I don't know, and quite possibly, probably not. And when I say probably not, why would I say that? Because there's an example given to us in history with Jesus. And you had the spiritual teachers at the time, the Jewish leaders of their faith, the Sanhedrin. Literally all of the Jewish leaders at the time would be representative of spiritual teachers today that teach non-duality. They appeared to be loving, kind-hearted people. They appeared to have as the core of their focus to help educate and direct the people to becoming one with God. That's what it appeared to be at the surface. And yet, if you're a Christian, you know that the results proves beyond shadow of a doubt that that isn't true, since they were responsible for killing Jesus. Essentially, the God they worship, ignorantly worship. So they killed their God. Or they at least had Jesus killed. Because he taught something that was different from, not only different from what was accepted to be true, but it took the power away from the leaders of the spiritual Judaism at the time. It took the power away from the huge organized church. What I teach, that non-duality is not only a perversion of the truth, but it denies the very existence of the God, the creator of all of reality. It denies the pure love of God. And the people that are steadfast or totally engulfed in the concept of non-duality will deny that so profusely that they would say that I'm an ignorant fool. And if push comes to shove, they would prefer me to be dead than to stand face to face with them and tell them they are liars. They are ignorant fools. They don't know what the hell they're talking about. They are too proud to put down the power that they have gained in this reality, the money that they make, the books that they sell, the ashrams that they have control over, the people that follow them. They're too proud to let go of that power, that money, that influence, to follow the humble path that leads to the truth of God, of becoming one with God, of God enlightenment. You cannot become one with God while holding on to the teaching of non-duality. It's as if, or shall I say, it is as. What happens is you have the fools. And when I say fools, I'm not talking about it in a negative connotation. I'm talking about it in that they have been fooled. All human beings have been fooled into believing that they are human beings. That, in fact, this reality is a tangible product that is real. And that when they look at themselves in a mirror, they say, I am a man, I am a woman, I am a school teacher, I am a firefighter, I am a guru, I am this, I am that. And then there's the others that say, when they start to learn a bit about spirituality, they go, what am I? Who am I? And then in walks the gurus of non-duality and says, I will help you with that question. Oh, how will you help me with that question? I will explain it. And they say, and they use the Upanishads and the teachings and the Vedas and the Brahma Sutras and etc., etc., etc. to support their perversion provided by the God of this reality, that in fact non-duality is real. And then they go on to explain what it is. And it takes a long time. For those that don't understand non-duality, it takes a long time before you finally get to the powerful truth that they want to give you, which is that you are, in fact, God. In reality, why would that make sense? Why does that come into the equation? Well, it comes in because people have fear. They're too fearful to understand what the truth is. So they're losing their grip. Enlightenment is starting to creep in, or let's put it this way. the teaching of enlightenment is starting to creep into their awareness. And it scares the heck out of them. Because enlightenment is teaching that all of reality is an illusion. That in fact nothing exists. There's no universe, there's no light, there's no darkness, there's no space. It's all an illusion. And then you obviously, as a thinking human being, go, well, then if it's all an illusion, what am I? And the fear sets in that, oh my gosh, I don't exist. I'm nothing. When I die and this body is dead, I will cease to exist. It just is so scary. They cling to non-duality because that's the next step. It's like if you're losing everything, it's all starting to dissolve. Everything that you thought was real is starting to dissolve. And it's scary, scary, scary. And so they go, oh my gosh, non-duality. Thank you for teaching me non-duality. I can lose my grip on reality and now cling to the false teaching that I'm God. Everything is God, therefore I'm God. And the evilness of that teaching is that it deviates away from the humble connection to God that it should be, in that you don't have this I love God. You can say I love myself because I am God, but that denies the duality of love. When two people love each other, there's a duality there. That is erased in non-duality. They can say it's not erased, but that's because they practice cognitive dissonance. Because you cannot love another individual if that individual is yourself. So when they practice cognitive dissonance, they can say, yes, I believe in non-duality and I love you. It's an oxymoron. It can't happen. You love yourself. It's reflective of the epitome of narcissism in thinking that you are the pinnacle, that when you become enlightened of non-duality, that you have finally realized that you are everything, that you are God. It is the absolute epitome of narcissism. It can't be taken to a higher step. So, how do you erase that to become one with God? That is absolutely impossible to do from within the reality, from within all realities. The only way that can be erased is if you actually have a meeting with Brahma. I don't think it can happen even if you have a meeting with Jesus, with the Christ. I don't think it can happen. Because Jesus, the Christ, is a product in the same way that you're a product of the illusory reality. And so the only way to have proof, positive, that non-duality is not reflective of the truth is if you actually have a meeting with God, with Brahma. And at that time, it's 100% impossible to believe in non-duality. Because God will never have a one-on-one communication with you while you maintain the ignorance of non-duality. That has to go first. It's the concept of faith before the realization. You would have to possess the faith that non-duality isn't true. And then when I say faith, it can only be faith. Because again, you can't have the proof first. You cannot realize that non-duality isn't true as long as you exist in a non-dual reality. Do you see what I'm saying? 100% of this reality, of this illusory reality, 100% of it is non-dual. And so when a spiritual person becomes enlightened in this non-dual reality, they will default to non-duality. This is why Buddha never taught anything about God separate from himself, because he didn't escape it. He became one with the reality, which results in a belief in non-duality. How could it be otherwise? It's only when God communicates with you directly that it's possible to escape the fallacy of non-duality. And that cannot happen without having the faith first that what I'm telling you is true. And secondly, it cannot happen without a paradoxical situation occurring. And there is a valid reason for that. God creates the reality and cannot violate the rule that he created of having a one-on-one communication with anyone prior to them climbing out of the environment of the illusion first. Because if God were to communicate with an individual, there is zero possibility of ignorance. And it's necessary to have ignorance. It's necessary for you to exist in a reality where you don't know what the truth is. The necessity of that is the way that you develop and grow. And I know that too goes against the concept of non-duality, because it would assume, since you are one with the oneness of the illusion of reality, then ignorance is seen as ignorance. In other words, it's impossible to be ignorant. Just because you don't know what reality is doesn't mean you're ignorant. It means you're a part of that totality. And so, how do you become one with God? Well, you just keep on the path where you are now. As I said in the beginning, there's no reason to think that this is a necessity in not only a single lifetime, but in the lifetime in which you are in right now. Now, saying that, most people would have anxiety, thinking, well, I want it to happen in this lifetime. I don't want to live another lifetime. I don't want to do this again. Okay, that's fine. Then what are you going to do about it? What are you going to do to become one with God? What are you going to do to have a connection with God that erases non-duality? What is it you're going to do? Especially given the fact that, think about this concept. How do you learn the spiritual truths that I'm talking about? How do you do that when these are the facts? The facts are, teaching this truth is impossible for it to convert you. You have to do it on your own, regardless of what I say or anyone else. Think about this. Jesus, Buddha, Krishna, anyone you can think of, none of them had the power to convert an individual into becoming one with God in an instant through enlightenment. None of them. If you believe the concept of Jesus raising Lazarus from the dead, wouldn't you think Lazarus would be instantly the most spiritual person on the planet? And yet there's nothing written about Lazarus as being this phenomenally enlightened, knowledgeable person. So clearly that doesn't work. So whatever Krishna taught, once he was dead, there was no longer the ability for the living to teach another living individual. And yet that is the best way to learn the truth, is to learn directly from the mouth of a living, enlightened being. Why is that so? Because the living, enlightened being has the dynamic nature to twist and turn. And when I say twist and turn, I'm talking about the truth, the way you need to learn it. And you question and answer and listen. And that individual can twist it this way and that way and all over the place. It's very flexible, tailored directly to another human being, another living individual. And even that doesn't work. It is only significantly better in helping you to become aware and enlightened. But once the individual or the teacher or the guru is dead, what they taught is reduced to words. In other words, someone else writes down what the living guru taught. But writing it down, it's no longer flexible. It no longer has the ability to twist and turn and so it is extremely difficult to learn the truths and become enlightened from anything that is written. And the longer time goes by, the more it's perverted. And again, I don't mean perverted in a negative connotation. I mean perverted in that it has been altered. through different languages and different understandings of different people. I mean, everything you read is an interpretation from some other supposed enlightened being. It's woefully inadequate. And I think the main principle, one of the main principles that Jesus taught is to pray to God. And though that doesn't seem to work very well in most cases, that's the only method. Not only the only method, it is the process and the pathway to becoming one with God, is through prayer. Because that is establishing that link to the living God. Naturally, you're not going to do that as a follower of non-duality. It doesn't make any sense. Since you are the source of all truth, why would you pray to another individual separate from yourself? That would actually deny the concept of non-duality in itself right then and there. And yet that is the only way to establish the living link to Brahma himself, God. And in that respect, what you are doing is you're trying to establish a link as if you were speaking to a living, enlightened being, to where he can twist and turn and tailor the teaching directly to you in the way you understand the truth and the way you interact with it. Because every individual has different experiences and different understandings that need to be altered and twisted and turned and tailored so that they become knowledgeable or enlightened. And so through prayer, you're trying the best you can to establish a living link to a deity, a God, that is separate from yourself. Now, again, if you drop back even to another level, then we're all back to the concept of Brahman, the darkness of nothingness, of unorganized. That leads me into the last thing I wanted to talk about. When I say Brahman, it's like let's take a concept. Let's take an oak tree. And let's call the oak tree Brahman. Excuse me. And let's say I built a dining room table out of oak. And it's a beautiful table, it's big, seats 8 people, elaborately built, beautiful inlays. And it's entirely made out of oak. Well, in your spiritual teachings, they would say, well, what's the difference between the oak tree and the table? And they would say, well, there's no difference. The table is the tree. But I'm not talking about what it's made out of. I'm talking about the table itself. I can make a table out of steel, and that's not the oak tree. I can make a table out of a rock, and that's not an oak tree. I can make a table out of anything. Do you understand the difference? You are not Brahman. God is not Brahman. I'm talking about the nature of a table. Once it becomes something, it is no longer Brahman. And that something, a table, has nothing to do with the oak tree from which it was made. Do you get that? Is that sinking into your head? In other words, it's taught that God created man and women, or man from clay, from mud. God could create man from anything. It doesn't matter what a man is made out of. That's not the point of the issue. The point of the issue is the man, the human being, isn't what it's made out of. It's something entirely different. It transcends at a quantum level well beyond what it's made out of. So much so, it isn't what it's made out of. And so when I say non-duality devolves back and says, oh, I'm the oak tree, because the oak tree is representative of the entirety of the table. And yet the table is not the oak tree. It mistakenly assumes that, that's all. Because I can make a table, I can make a chair, I can make a spear, I can make a fishing pole, I can make a bow. I can make damn near anything out of an oak tree. And yet, the representative of what it is I'm making has nothing to do with the oak tree. Because I can make it out of anything. Do you understand the nature of the creativity of the fact that you are an embryonic God? Do you understand the concept that when I said years ago when I've made my teachings that I can create a red glowing orb from my thinking and in my mind? And I can spin it and visualize it in my hand on the tip of my finger spinning? And then I can lift it up and say it has no gravity of its own? Or shall I say it isn't affected by the gravity of this reality realm and it can sit there and spin? I'm not creating that out of anything. I'm creating it out of nothing. And yet in my mind's eye, I can see it. You can too if you have any imaginative powers. Has nothing to do with an oak tree or anything else. And everything to do with the nature of what I am. Using my own creative powers. That isn't done with a brain made out of living matter and tissue and everything. It isn't done with that. It doesn't need that to do what I just did. Does that make sense? We're talking about deep spiritual teachings that are way beyond what is known to the world, what is known in Hinduism, Sanatana Dharma, Christianity. I'm talking about the spiritual teachings that don't exist in this reality realm, that you cannot learn without the connection to God, Brahma. And it is fascinating. It is fascinating beyond belief. To exist alongside you and everyone else in this illusory realm, and at the same time being aware of what it all is and what it all represents. And that only has happened with and for me because of my profound love for God. Which why I have that, I don't even know. Did I learn it in another former lifetime? I don't know. Apparently so, since there's no valid source that I can think of in this life that I'm aware of. So hopefully I can convey that to you and you can search that out for yourself and get that in this lifetime. That's what I'm hoping for. And why am I hoping that? Because I desire to have eternal friends. I desire to have a loving link to you for all of eternity. There is absolutely nothing more valuable in all of reality, in all realities. There is nothing more valuable than having an eternal loving link to others like yourself. And so in closing, I want to tell you I love you. I love you profoundly. I value you beyond anything in existence. And I hope with all hoping that you find your way in this life, that you become enlightened, that you find a connection to God in the same way I did, that brings absolute satisfaction, it erases fear, but I think you have to erase the fear first. But the only way to do that is if you replace everything in your heart and soul with love. Anyways, I will talk to you later. I love you, and I hope you have a good week. Bye.